Black Genius Girl Beats Billionaire in $15 million poker game. Put your entire future on the felt little girl, unless you're afraid. Gregory Langford sneered, the poker chips rattling like distant thunder against the polished oak as every celebrity in his Pacific Heights penthouse leaned closer. Amira Carter was 10, barely tall enough for her sneakers to graze the floor. Yet she met the billionaire's ice-blue stare without blinking, one hand resting on the battered engineer's briefcase her father had carried to interviews where no one would hire him. She remembered the way he tucked that briefcase into the trunk every dawn, how empty it always came back, and suddenly the whole room felt like an invisible chessboard where no one had ever let her father pick a piece. Tonight, she would be his queen. "Deal," she whispered, and the single word rippled through the suite louder than applause. Gregory's wife, Karen, laughed behind her champagne flute, a brittle sound. A congresswoman with a discreet body cam pretended to scroll her phone. And Daryl Carter stood frozen at the wall, limo cap in hand, caught between pride and the terror of losing everything. Gregory flipped the first card with theatrical contempt, bragging that each chip was worth more than Amira's neighborhood. Amira answered by quoting pot odds under her breath, fingertips tapping a silent rhythm that only she and the white hat hacker, who had tutored her for 6 secret months, understood. Every beat meant a probability, every breath a new branch of the decision tree. She visualized digital overlays, color-coded ranges sliding across the felt, while her opponent saw only a child. Gregory pushed forward the pink deed to his Malibu smart home, demanding that if she lost her family, leave California forever. Amira countered, without raising her voice. "And if I win, you'll kneel and apologize to my dad for 7 years of invisible insults, and we'll stream it so the whole world can remember." Snickers turned to nervous coughs. Karen's smile cracked. Yet the dealer, an ex-Vegas pro, Gregory, imported for flair, merely shuffled, oblivious to the phone in Amira's pocket that had already started broadcasting to thousands of math club followers. When the flop landed, Gregory's eyes gleamed. King of hearts, queen of clubs, king of diamonds, monstrous strength. Amira's pupils dilated, not from fear, but from calculation. She recalled her mentor's mantra, arrogance programs itself. She traced the queen on the table with her pinky, a private promise that the most powerful piece would soon move. Outside San Francisco, lights flickered like CMOS circuits, and a million unsolved equations unfurled in her head. Inequality curves, wage gap graphs, the trajectory of a single live stream toward viral ignition. She called sliding forward a neatly folded scrap, her father's old rejection letter from Langford Cyber Systems, signed by Gregory himself. Gasps shot around the room. One line of cheap ink had never looked so expensive. Gregory grinned, thinking humiliation had rattled her. Amira merely tucked the letter beneath her chip stack like a talisman, then said, "Some debts aren't paid in dollars." The turn card hovered in the dealer's grip, tension bending the air, every guest's phone now lifted to capture the moment. Amira's pocket cam notification pinged, viewer count doubling, just as the card hit the felt. She exhaled once, steady as calculus, and everyone leaned in. But before they could read the board, Gregory slammed his fist down, proclaiming the pot closed, and demanding she fold if she valued her father's dignity. Amira's heartbeat stayed level. She slid a single black chip forward, eyes alight with something fiercer than courage, inevitability. "Sir," she said, voice soft, yet carrying to every corner. "Chess teaches that the queen decides when the game ends, not the king." Gregory's sneer faltered. The river card hovered inches above the table, and as the dealer prepared to let gravity choose the next disaster, the livestream counter surged past 10,000, and Daryl realized too late there was no off-ramp on this highway of consequences. "Drop it!" Amira breathed the only command she'd given all night, as the dealer's wrist twitched and the river card spun onto the felt like a blade, the 10 of diamonds sliding into perfect alignment with the 5, 6, 7, 8 already showing. Gregory Langford's triumphant grin froze mid-flash. To everyone else, these crimson pips looked like harmless punctuation on what he believed was a winning sentence. But Amira's mathlit mind saw the exclamation point, completing an unstoppable straight flush. Gregory shoved his whole cards face up, King of Hearts, King of Spades announcing his boat on the bay, to a roar of artificial confidence. Cameras swiveled, Karen nearly cheered, and the Congresswoman's discreet livestream spiked to 20,000 viewers. Amira didn't flinch. Instead, she lifted her father's scuffed briefcase onto the table, popped the antique brass latches, and from inside drew a single laminated sheet covered in her own neat handwriting. Probability trees, color-coded edge percentages, and a highlighted line that read, 95% of tyrants self-destruct when they think the board is theirs. Gregory scoffed, then gasped when Amira turned over her first hole card, 9 of diamonds, followed by the Queen of Diamonds, her fingers moving with the solemnity of a violinist finishing the final bar. Gasps collapsed into stunned silence. The room's ambient chatter died like a fuse, quenched in water. A 10 to Queen straight flush, mathematically crushing the full house by light years, glowed under the pendant lamps. Gregory's mouth opened, but no words emerged. He looked to Karen, then to Daryl, then finally to the dealer, as though someone must volunteer a reality in which a child had not just rearranged his destiny. But reality kept marching. The Congresswoman's stream hit 40,000. Amira's own phone buzzed incessantly in her pocket as her math club server erupted with OMGs and ASCII fireworks. She spoke only to Daryl, soft enough that microphones still caught it. Dad, you once said real power is being able to choose kindness even when kindness was never offered. Tonight, I choose justice. Then louder for every lens, Mr. Langford, per our agreement, the kneel and apology are due immediately. Gregory slammed both palms on the table, veins rising like fault lines. This is fraud. Some kind of trick deck. No way those odds. But Amira slid the laminated sheet beside his king-heavy corpse of a hand index finger, tapping the line that said, "Probability never cares about ego." The Congresswoman's feed flashed a notification. Investors in Langford Cyber Systems had begun a furious group chat titled Emergency Board Call. Karen's phone rang. She answered, paled, and whispered, "Greg, they're pulling liquidity now." Amira turned to the guests. For transparency, I began streaming before the first shuffle. Multiple camera angles, RNG verification, on the used deck, third-party timestamping uploaded live to the blockchain, courtesy of a friend who knows your company's codebase better than you do. Gregory understood the implication. The very encryption protocols he patented were sealing his defeat immutably. Sweat dotted his temples. He tried reaching for his phone, but Amira's calm voice cut through. Important call. Take it on speaker. We all deserve front-row seats to accountability. The Congresswoman offered her own mic. Gregory refused. Karen covered the mouthpiece on her device. Honey, the board schedules a vote in 30 minutes. They say if you violate a documented wager broadcast to tens of thousands, you'll breach fiduciary duty. Gregory's pupils shrank. The crowd sensed a giant shrinking in real time. Yet, Amira wasn't finished. From the briefcase, she drew a small 3D printed chess queen, its black resin flecked with gold, and set it atop the towering mountain of chips and deeds. Symbol placement, she murmured, so every viewer remembers which piece decides the endgame. The queen's shadow stretched across Gregory's trembling hands like an eclipse. Cameras clicked. In the distance, a siren wailed somewhere on Van Ness Avenue, rising and falling like a verdict on the wind. Gregory swallowed throat sandpaper dry and opened his mouth to bargain. But the live stream chat exploded with the hashtag #NeilGregory climbing trends at a speed no marketing team could spin. Nothing in his empire had ever moved this fast. And as that realization broke the last wall of denial in his eyes, Amira leaned forward whispering, just for him, yet somehow for everyone. This board was never yours. It was always ours. You just never bothered to look below the veneer. She reclined, hands folded, waiting. Karen's phone chimed again. Investor text, 10 minutes to compliance or we dump. Gregory's jaw quivered. He sank halfway toward a kneel, hesitated, glanced around in a final plea for an exit that did not exist. Then the penthouse elevator dinged, doors parting to reveal a cluster of security staff bearing sealed envelopes with the corporate logo and the words "Emergency Injunction" stamped in red. The sight froze Gregory, mid-motion, half kneeling, half standing, a monarch-turned statue. The head guard advanced, envelope outstretched. "Sir, the board requests your electronic signature on this immediate transfer of voting shares, pending the outcome of your current predicament." Gregory's lips formed a silent curse as he realized he was kneeling anyway. Amira exhaled, steady as ever, but inside her chest thundered like surf against cliffs. She could almost feel generations of stacked odds tilting at last. Yet one critical move remained, and she wasn't about to play it until every watcher understood the full cost of arrogance. She lifted the chess queen, turned it once in the spotlight, and said, "Kings hate check, but they fear mate." Her thumb hovered over her phone's Go Live audio button, ready to patch in a voice neither Gregory nor the audience expected. The Congresswoman's camera zoomed tight on Amira's poised hand. The entire room held its breath, perched on the precipice of a revelation someone else had prepared to deliver. The instant Amira's thumb tapped Go Live audio, a warm baritone flooded every device in the penthouse. "Good evening, Mr. Langford. Remember me." The guard holding the injunction startled. Karen nearly dropped her phone. On screen, the name Dr. Ramon Ortiz Ethical Security Consortium glowed. Gregory's lips twitched with recognition and dread. Years ago, Ortiz had exposed a Langford-run data mining program and lost his tenure because Gregory's lawyers buried him in court. Now his voice, piped into 47,000 streams, carried the steadiness of long-delayed justice. For transparency, Ortiz continued, "I'm broadcasting from an independent server. Mr. Langford's encryption still works. It just no longer works for him." Amira set the black and gold queen upright on the mountain of chips, its shadow slicing across Gregory's half-kneel, like a sundial, marking the fall of an era. "Dr. Ortiz," she said, never breaking eye contact with Gregory, "please confirm the authenticity of the corporate gambling documents you forwarded." Ortiz chuckled softly. "Verified by 3 auditors and notarized on-chain. Viewers can download them now." Notifications pinged. Thousands of PDFs began populating timelines. Karen's screen filled with red exclamation marks from compliance officers. Gregory lurched to his feet, refusing to complete the kneel. "This is a coordinated attack. Industrial sabotage." Amira lifted the queen and knocked it gently against his king of hearts, the click echoing like a gavel. "Sabotage suggests secrecy. I prefer open-source accountability." Gregory's eyes darted to the guard. "Tear up that injunction. Alex, security answers to me." But Alex's earpiece crackled. He blanched. "Sir, board control shifted 12 minutes ago. I answer to interim chair Carter, until further notice." Gasps rippled. Daryl's knees buckled, and he grabbed the edge of a sofa to stay upright. His daughter had been interim chair for less than a quarter hour. Amira inhaled, voice steady but soft. "Dad, they finally read your resume." The room oscillated between awe and panic. Ortiz spoke again. "Mr. Langford, the FTC and Department of Labor are on joint call. They'd like to know why you required non-disclosure bets that forfeited employees' pensions." Gregory's swagger imploded. Sweat formed commas on his forehead. He pivoted to the Congresswoman, hoping for political rescue, but her camera kept rolling. "Votes back home. Loved live accountability." "All this for a poker hand," he rasped. Amira shook her head. "For every silent commute where my father rehearsed apologies he never owed." She turned the queen on its side, revealing a QR code inlaid at its base. "Scan it," she instructed. Phones rose. The code linked to a scholarship fund seeded by tonight's $15 million pot, plus matching donations rolling in during the stream. A ticker showed the balance climbing past $5.8 million tuition fuel for thousands of underrepresented prodigies. Karen began to cry, not from empathy, but from the cold certainty that their fortune was hemorrhaging in real time. Gregory's gaze fixed on the queen, lying beside his toppled kings, and something desperate sparked. He seized his phone thumb, hovering over an emergency recall app that could nuke his social accounts before the Neil video propagated further. Amira saw the motion and tightened her grip on the resin queen. One decisive move remained. The wrong second's hesitation would let him bury evidence and spin a new narrative. Ortiz's voice crackled, Amira, packet loss rising. He's about to trigger a wipe. 47,000 viewers watched the standoff compress into a heartbeat. Amira raised the queen like a judge, ready to strike the bench, and the stream timer ticked 0:29 before auto-refresh. 29 seconds flickered on the wipe clock when Amira brought the black and gold queen down, not onto the table, but squarely onto Gregory's emergency recall phone, the resin base cracking the glass and jamming the screen in a frozen kaleidoscope of error codes. The penthouse gasped as the billionaire's last escape route shattered into glittering shards across his custom Persian rug, and the live stream timer lurched past 00:27, with packet loss instantly returning to 0. Gregory roared and lunged, but Alex the guard stepped between them. Protocol now answering to board control. Karen cried out. Ortiz's voice punched through the speakers. Failsafe confirmed all data mirrored to triple servers, and the viewer counter rocketed above 60,000 each click, a nail sealing Gregory's digital coffin. Amira steadied the cracked queen in her palm, like proof that elegance could be a weapon, then spoke so quietly the room had to hush to hear kings flip tables, queens change the rules. She nodded to Daryl, who finally stepped forward, not as a chauffeur, but as interim chair. Reading aloud the first clause of the injunction effective immediately, Gregory Langford relinquishes all executive authority pending ethics review. Gregory's face blanched. The guard handed over a corporate tablet demanding biometric confirmation, and with every camera rolling, he pressed his trembling thumb because refusal would trigger instant asset freeze by the fiduciary AI he himself had commissioned. Ortiz announced, timestamp logged. Transfer immutable, while stock ticker apps on the guests' phones tanked in real-time, red bars plunging like iron into water. But Amira wasn't done. She lifted the ruined phone, and using the Queen's QR code again, broadcast a split screen on one side, the scholarship fund, total climbing past 8 million. On the other, a social VR auditorium, where hundreds of under-resourced students had gathered avatars, cheering the moment justice went viral. The Congresswoman addressed them directly, pledging bipartisan legislation to outlaw non-disclosure wagers. Applause emoticons reigned. Yet even as the world outside celebrated, tension inside the penthouse twisted tighter, because Gregory, kneeling by shards, whispered a threat only Amira heard: board or no board, girls like you disappear in court. Her spine chilled, but she met his gaze, replying for the stream. Threats are just debts you can't afford yet. Then she reached into her father's old briefcase one final time and produced a thin, embossed envelope bearing the seal of the Northern District Court emergency motion, already filed by civil rights attorneys Ortiz had cued hours earlier. Karen, seeing the seal, sagged against a column. She understood lawsuits would last years longer than their remaining capital. Gregory tried to snatch the envelope, but Alex restrained him. The billionaire's struggles smeared blood from his cut palm across the marble red streak, under chandeliers like a signature he never intended. Sirens climbed the hill outside. Flashing blue reflected on glass walls, municipal securities, fraud detectives arriving faster than anyone expected. Amira glanced at Ortiz's status bar agents 5 minutes out. She placed the fractured queen upright amid broken glass, a tiny monarch over a kingdom of ruin, and turned to Daryl. Dad, time to go. The boardroom is yours now. Daryl nodded, yet worry flickered. Leaving a cornered man in his own fortress felt dangerous. Behind them, Gregory's eyes narrowed on the splintered resin piece, calculating something reckless, one act of revenge still within reach, before law and liquidity stripped him bare. Amira sensed the churn of that calculation and hesitated at the elevator threshold, intuition pricking like static. Outside, sirens grew louder, but inside the marble hall, a volatile silence pooled seconds before a storm no algorithm had forecast. Amira's foot was still half inside the elevator when Gregory sprang not toward her, but toward the fallen chess queen, scooping the splintered resin and jamming its QR base against a recessed wall panel she'd overlooked. A muted beep sounded, marble shutters slammed over every window, and the penthouse lights bled to red. Gregory whirled, eyes wild. "Failsafe 2, he rasped, brandishing the broken piece like a detonator. "You sealed my account's little prodigy, but you forgot whose house you're standing in." Air pressure locks hissed. Alex's radio crackled dead. Cell signals vanished to 0 bars. Gregory's private Faraday mode had cocooned the suite, buying him minutes no lawyer could. Daryl yanked Amira back as titanium grills scissored over the elevator doors, trapping them inside what felt suddenly like a gilded bunker. Karen screamed for the code, but Gregory only tightened his grip on the resin shard point, aimed at the keypad like a poisoned stinger. Amira's brain fired through possibilities' manual override panel, hidden behind Langford's Warhol biometric redundancies. She had mapped, but never tested the probability curve of panic multiplied by hubris. Sirens outside were now a muffled rumor, detectives stalled in the hallway by magnetic seals. Gregory stalked toward the poker table, bleeding palm, dripping across the felt, ranting that a single manual command could wipe every ledger copy Ortiz held, if only he reached the fiber optic port beneath the credenza. Alex lunged to intercept. Gregory swung the queen like a blade, missing, but shattering a pendant lamp, sparks flaring. In the strobing red and amber gloom, Amira noticed something crucial. Each spark triggered a faint pulse on the glass floor tiles, an optic sensor array mapping intruders. If she could reroute its feedback loop to overload the Faraday cage, outside signals might pierce the blockade. She slipped the engineer's briefcase onto a floor sensor, its metal latches reflecting light. Just so, then whispered to her father, "We need reflection angles at 8. More points. Silverware, champagne trays, anything." Daryl understood. He and Alex began sliding mirrored objects across the zigzag grid, while Gregory fumbled under the credenza for the kill port, oblivious to the sudden bloom of feedback glare spiraling through the optic web. Karen, sobbing, begged him to stop. He snarled that empires weren't felled by children. At 87% reflected saturation, Amira calculated the sensor's own watchdog would reboot into external diagnostic, opening a 5-second corridor for outside frequencies. She gave Alex a curt nod. He hurled a silver serving platter onto the final tile. The floor strobed white. The lights cut entirely, and in the pitch-black instant, Amira's phone buzzed back to life, 1 bar, then 2. She hit send, on a pre-written string, unseal, flashing to Ortiz, the congresswoman, and the detectives. But before the Faraday veil collapsed, Gregory's hand found the fiber optic port. He jammed the resin queen's broken tip toward the jack sparks blooming blue. The suite echoed with a pop, like a circuit dying, and every screen, including Amira's, froze half-lit. Kingdoms, she realized, can fall both ways. In darkness, smelling of ozone and fear, she didn't know which signal escaped first, their SOS or Gregory's wipe command, and the pneumatic whine of the emergency door motors offered no clue as to whose code had just won. The pneumatic howl rose to a shriek, lights stuttered back to life, and for one breathless second, every device in the penthouse glowed a different verdict. Gregory's glass-shattered phone showed "Purge sequence complete," while Amira's cracked screen pulsed. "Unseal confirmed." 2 incompatible realities squeezed into the same instant, like matter and antimatter poised to collide. Then Ortiz's voice sliced through the speaker grids, distorted but a live signal received external backups, secure law enforcement breaching now. Gregory spun from the fiber port, triumphant sneer curdling into disbelief, as the armored doors at the hallway end groaned under a hydraulic ram. His wipe had killed the local streams, but the mirror servers outside the cage were already cloning themselves like digital Hydra heads. Sirens thundered closer. Sprinklers kicked on hissing cold mist that turned shattered glass into glittering frost, and motion trigger cabinets slammed open to deploy halon canisters. Langford's last-ditch data fire suppression lining the air with choking gas. Alex barked for respirators. Amira yanked 2 masks from the wall kit, slapping one onto her father before pulling the other over her own trembling chin, adrenaline roaring like surf in her ears. Through the fog, she saw Gregory seize Karen's wrist and drag her toward the terrace doors, knife-sharp resin shard pressed to her throat, screaming that he still owned vertical airspace. Daryl tried to advance but skidded on wet marble. Gregory kicked a toppled stool into Amira's path, buying seconds to punch a code into the terrace lock still functional on backup power. Glass sliders parted to the stormy night, icy bay wind tumbling in. Red-blue strobes from helicopters flashed across his face as he hauled Karen toward the railing, shouting that one step closer and he'd jump with her. Amira's mind sprinted. Terrace motion sensors were networked to the same optical grid she'd overloaded. Maybe the feedback loop still ran hot enough to spoof a fault and freeze the door rails. She toggled her phone signal, weak but present, and fired a diagnostic ping to the grid. Seconds stretched. Gregory dragged Karen onto slick tile wind, ripping her silk shawl into the sky. Below, Nob Hill streets sparkled like circuitry. Ortiz crackled in her earpiece. "If you lock rails now, SWAT can rappel 30 seconds out." Amira answered with the only keystroke she had left. Queenlock. Execute a script she'd written at 9, after learning how chess notation could map to command shells. Metal shrieked as terrace doors slammed and magnetized, trapping Gregory outside with nothing but a 30-story drop behind him. He wheeled, yanking Karen against the glass resin shard, drawing a red ribbon on her neck. Halon fumes swirled underfoot like storm clouds. Inside, siren-lit fog and sprinkler rain turned the suite into a ghost aquarium, Amira and Daryl silhouettes against a flashing city. SWAT ropes slapped the windows. Laser dots crawled over Gregory's trembling shoulders. Yet one misread twitch could send Karen over the edge. Ortiz whispered, 10 seconds to breach. We need him distracted. Amira stepped to the door, pressed her cracked phone to the pane so Gregory could see the resurrected livestream count, ticking past 84,000, and lifted the fractured queen in her other hand like a microphone. "Gregory," she said, voice muffled through the mask, yet unmistakably calm. "The board will remember whether its former king saved his queen or threw her overboard." Gregory's eyes flickered a glitch of humanity, or a final algorithm of spite, and the wind howled around them all as the breaching charges began their countdown. 3, 2. The muffled countdown crackled through Amira's earpiece as the SWAT sergeant cued detonators, but Gregory Langford's grip on Karen's wrist only tightened. "Tell them to stand down, or she falls." He howled wind, snatching the words into trembling night air that tasted of metal and halon. Behind him, the vertigo of San Francisco glittered like shattered circuitry. In front, reinforced glass and lockdown bolts sealed his exit. Amira pressed her palms to the pane queen shard, glimmering. "Gregory, every camera is rolling. This is your last chance to choose the headline." He sneered, crimson drops from Karen's neck, speckling his cuff. "I built headlines. I'll write this one in her blood if I have to." A rotor thumped overhead. Laser dots multiplied across his chest. Ortiz's voice arrived through static. 8 seconds to breach, they won't wait. Amira looked into Karen's terrified eyes and saw something that jolted her memory years earlier. Karen had been a sociology professor who lost tenure after defending whistleblowers Gregory's doing again. The queen stood between 2 pawns she'd never meant to sacrifice to each other. Amira slid her cracked phone against the glass, letting Gregory glimpse the live chat, screaming, "Jew, choose mercy," donations surging past 10 million. "You think money buys absolution?" he spat. She shook her head. "Not absolution options. 10 million sets up a restorative justice fund in Karen's name. Walk inside a live, sign it, and her legacy eclipses your scandal in every search result forever." For a heartbeat, greed and fear warred in his eyes. But the bead of the laser settled on his sternum. He sensed the shooter's calculus tipping. Gregory dragged Karen sideways, heel slipping on wet tile, and the resin shards skittered from his slick fingers, clinking across the cement before tumbling into darkness. His leverage vanished with it. Yet he still had her body as shield. Amira's pulse hammered. One wrong move and gravity would finish what ego began. Daryl's voice cracked from behind her. "Baby girl, step back. Let the professionals handle it." But Amira saw the breach timer click 2 seconds glass, about to shatter into flashbang chaos, and knew Crossfire could fling both of them over the rail. She tapped the pane, drawing Gregory's gaze to her lifted queen piece, now little more than a fractured figurine, but still a symbol. "Kings fall," she mouthed. "Queens adapt." With her free hand, she thumbed a silent alarm option on her phone. EMP Pulse Terrace, only one of Langford's own security redundancies, meant to disable drones. It would kill laser sights for 3 seconds, long enough to reset the shooter's trigger discipline, maybe long enough for Karen to act. Ortiz hissed. "Pulse will blind SWAT. They'll think he's going for a device." "Trust me," she whispered, thumb hovering. Gregory saw her lips move, misread the intent, and snarled, pushing Karen between himself and the door as living armor. The timer hit 1. Amira pressed send. Terrace floodlights popped dark. Lasers winked out. Sync alarms blared, confused. Instantly, Karen twisted decades of suppressed fury, detonating into a heel strike that shattered Gregory's kneecap. He screamed, folding hands off her throat, but as he fell backward, the slick tile gave way to air, and a yawning 30-story drop. Karen lunged to grab him, reflex or mercy, no one could tell, catching only the sleeve of his blazer. Fabric tore with a desperate rip. Gregory's weight yanked free, teetering over the abyss, as his eyes locked onto Amira's through the glass, an emperor at checkmate seeing the board vanish. But gravity hadn't finished its verdict, and Karen's balance now teetered too, her heels sliding toward the edge as she flailed for a purchase that wasn't there. The EMP countdown ended. Lights roared back. Lasers reacquired targets now on 2 precarious figures against the night. Amira's shriek of warning collided with the concussive crack of breaching charges, blowing the terrace doors inward, shards erupting like crystal rain. The world slowed to splinters as Karen's silhouette pitched forward. Gregory's fingers clawed empty air, and Amira leaped through the falling glass toward a precipice where justice and tragedy swung on a single heartbeat-thin thread. Glass sprayed like icy confetti as Amira vaulted through the breach arms, outstretched mind calculating vectors, the way other kids counted hopscotch squares. Karen's hand appeared, first fingers clawing at nothing, then her forearm, then the frantic shimmer of her eyes as her center of gravity tipped past the rail. Amira slammed knees first onto slick tile momentum, sliding her 3 feet farther than planned, but she reached, snagged Karen's wrist, with a snap of tendons that burned like fire, anchoring her torso flat to the ground. The force jerked Karen back from oblivion, yet the sudden torque snapped what was left of Gregory's blazer sleeve. He spun away, a dark silhouette swallowed by updraft. Instinctively, Amira shut her eyes, bracing for the distant thud, but it never came. SWAT rappel lines had been dangling a heartbeat away, and one operator's reflex looped a safety lanyard around Gregory's ankle mid-plummet, snatching him into a pendulum arc that slammed him against the building facade, before lowering him bruised and sputtering to the macy gray top below. Karen sobbed breath into Amira's shoulder, siren wind howling around them. A medic hauled them both inside, while tactical medics flooded the terrace. Halon alarms, disengaged sprinklers hissed off, and hallway shutters finally unsealed with hydraulic groans that felt like a fortress exhaling defeat. Ortiz's voice filled the suite again, steady this time, confirming redundant backups, safe SEC subpoenas in transit, and public streams resuming with a new counter already past $100,000. Daryl knelt beside his daughter, eyes bright with a pride no paycheck ever bought, helping her to her feet. Shards crunched under their shoes, but the fractured queen lay somehow upright amid the debris, tiny sovereign over toppled empire. Amira scooped it up, turning to Karen, whose throat bore only a thin crimson scratch. "Your fund is live," she whispered. "It's named the Karen Initiative for Ethical Innovation." Cameras caught Karen nodding, tears mixing with rain, as she accepted the resin figure into trembling palms. Down on the street, Gregory cuffed, soaked, and babbling about hostile takeovers was ushered into an unmarked sedan. Every flashbulb burned a little more permanence into his downfall. Yet the livestream chat wasn't cheering vengeance anymore. Hashtags shifted to GER Rebuild, and scholarship, unlocked donors pinging from 5 continents faster than Ortiz's servers could update totals. Inside Daryl's old briefcase, scarred soaked but unbowed, rested on the ruined poker table. He opened it, removing the rejection letter now water-blurred, and fed it into a forensic evidence pouch. "Some memories deserve archiving," he said, "but not display." Amira smiled muscles, finally admitting exhaustion, and let her head rest against his shoulder. The congresswoman approached, promising to fast-track bipartisan bills banning non-disclosure wagers. Ortiz confirmed he'd testify. Karen offered classroom space at a downtown tech hub for Amira's growing online academy. Night, seeded to dawn streaks of amber, painting the skyline, and helicopters peeled away as the crisis tag flipped to human interest feature. Amira watched sunrise climb glass towers and thought of all the kids tuning in from bedrooms cluttered with secondhand laptops, seeing that arrogance could be outcomputed and that queens could write new rules before their voices even changed. She held the resin shard aloft one last time for the camera, letting light fracture through its crack until it sparkled like a prism, then offered it to the nearest officer for chain of custody, turning away before she could second-guess the symbolism. "Game over," she murmured, but the grin that tugged at her lips meant the next match, the one fought in classrooms, courtrooms, and code bases, had only just begun.